Hello, my name is Eleanor Whitfield. The day my daughter got married, I sat quietly at table 16, hidden behind a column of orchids, and said nothing about the $80 million in beachfront villas my late husband left me. To everyone, I was just another guest, but inside, I carried the weight of his legacy, the secret that could change everything. Watching my daughter smile at her new husband, I felt the sting of betrayal from those who underestimated me. Yet silence, I knew, would become my weapon. They placed me at table 16 behind a column of orchids like a shadow at my own daughter's wedding. The blossoms towered above me, their pale throats open toward the chandeliers, a living curtain that sliced the ballroom in two. I could hear the laughter at the head table, the bursts of applause that followed every toast. But the orchids kept me half blind, as if the room itself had conspired to remind me I was no longer central, only tolerated. The guests around me, distant cousins, neighbors, invited for appearance, shifted politely in their seats, speaking of travel and careers. Their eyes brushed past me, eager to avoid the embarrassment of sitting with a mother who had been deliberately set aside. Charleston's grand ballroom glittered in June light chandeliers, scattering gold across marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Yet for all its sparkle, the air felt cold, like the salty wind that whips along the Atlantic villas Thomas once built. Goosebumps rose on my arms beneath silk sleeves. I pressed my fingers against the linen, reminding myself that tonight belonged to Caroline. That was the chant I repeated silently, though it dulled none of the sting. Caroline leaned toward Brandon, her veil pinned like a wing, her smile widening whenever he whispered in her ear. Each time she scanned the room, her gaze slipped past me. Perhaps she feared what she might read in my face, or perhaps it was easier to pretend I was not there. She laughed loudly, too loudly, and my heart understood. This seating was not a mistake. It was a message written in place cards and orchids declaring where I belonged. Memory rose unbidden. Thomas at another gala, his warm hand steadying mine when senators and donors pressed too close. He had been a builder, not just of villas, but of certainty. I remembered walking with him through the wide verandas he designed, shutters painted twilight blue stone cut to resist storms. He would pause gesture to a joint or beam and remind me, never sign anything without reading every line. At the time, I thought it was a quirk of business. Only later did I learn it was survival. Applause burst again. Brandon stood glass-raised cufflinks catching the light. "Thank you for welcoming me into the family," he declared, the word family drawn out like a claim. Caroline's cheeks flushed as she pressed closer to him. The crowd clapped, glasses chimed, and I saw in the reflection of the chandelier that Brandon's eyes were scanning, measuring, already claiming what was not his. Around my table, the chatter turned careless. Honeymoons, inheritances, futures. Their words rolled toward me like waves gnawing at a seawall. None of them knew what Thomas had left behind the chain of seaside villas now worth $80 million. None of them guessed that beneath my quiet exterior, I carried a sealed envelope of knowledge and power. To Brandon, I was an obstacle dressed in silk. To Caroline, I was a shadow she could set aside with the stroke of a seating chart. I stared at the orchids again, their stems thick as if they had been planted to keep me in my place. My exile was not chance. It was chosen intentional, a warning of the battles still to come. The sting was sharp, but under it grew something colder, stronger. I did not rise. I did not protest. My silence wrapped around me, not weakness, but stone walls, the kind Thomas built to withstand the sea. I stayed silent, but silence would become my weapon. A week later, a knock came that would change everything. I had just set the last teacup in its place when it sounded polite, deliberate. The June breeze carried salt and roses through the open window as I dried my hands. On the porch stood Brandon, all charm in a pressed shirt, and beside him, a man with a briefcase. Mother Brandon greeted me as if he had earned the word. "We thought we'd check on you." The lawyer lifted a folder before he even smiled. The bold heading on the first page read, "Durable Power of Attorney." Good manners demanded I step aside. I led them into the kitchen, where sunlight softened the lace curtains. I set 3 cups on the table, though I already knew neither man had come for tea. Steam hissed from the kettle while Brandon leaned comfortably into the chair with the garden view. "You shouldn't have to worry about bills and property details," he said warmly. "I can help just temporarily. For convenience." Thomas's voice pulsed in memory. Never sign anything without reading every line. He had said it often, and always it was true. The lawyer spoke smoothly. "This instrument empowers a trusted family member to act on your behalf. Routine matters only banking property signatures." I poured tea, watching how they reached for the cups. "Routine," I repeated. "And who benefits from this routine?" Brandon chuckled, masking impatience. "You're thorough. That's what I admire." I turned a page. Clauses sprawled wide authority over bank accounts, deeds, even the power to sell property without further consent. "Immediate effect," I read. "No medical condition required." "It's efficient that way," the lawyer replied. "If something happened, precious time could be lost," Brandon added quickly. "And if nothing happens?" I asked. Brandon smiled wider. "Then nothing changes except you'll rest easier." Outside, a gull cried above the ocean. The wind rattled the trellis Thomas had built for roses. I thought of his scarred hands, his strength. He built for storms, not convenience. "Which of you drafted the property sections?" I asked. "I did," the lawyer said. "Then you know exactly what they do." "They protect you," he insisted, though his eyes flickered. Brandon leaned closer. "You trust me, don't you? We're family." Family. The same word he had stretched at the wedding, as if claiming ownership with syllables alone. I turned another page and let the silence lengthen. Brandon's fingers drummed once against the wood. "This is just paperwork," he urged. "Paper is never just paper," I answered. "It's a promise someone else can cash." His smile thinned. "We're speaking hypotheticals." "No," I said, folding the folder shut. The sound marked the end of pretense. Brandon laughed too loud. "You know I'd never act against your wishes." "Then you'll have no objection to leaving the papers for review," I replied evenly. The lawyer slid his card toward me. His hand was steady, but his eyes were not. Brandon shifted back, disappointment tucked beneath a mask of concern. "Time matters, Mother. These things are easier when everything is calm." "Calm is when people make their worst bargains," I said quietly. More to Thomas's memory than to them. I offered sugar as if nothing were amiss, but the tension filled every corner of the room. Brandon didn't touch his cup. "We can come back tomorrow. You sign, we'll handle the rest." No, just one word, but it set itself down like stone. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Perhaps you'd like." "There's no need," I cut in, eyes fixed on Brandon. His mask reformed quickly, but not fast enough to hide the crack beneath. I looked at him, then at the papers. My silence was louder than his voice. Silence isn't chains, it's armor. The July sun slanted through my kitchen window, scattering light over the oak table where the folder still sat. Its edges had begun to curl from the humidity, though no pen had touched its pages. Each morning, I considered moving it out of sight, Yet I left it there as a reminder of what Brandon wanted and of what I had refused. The screen door creaked. Dorothy Miller stepped in without waiting for an answer, the way neighbors of long standing do. Her basket carried peaches, their skins glowing with fuzz and color. She set them down, and her sharp eyes fell immediately on the folder. "Power of attorney," she said flatly. "So they've come knocking at your door too." I poured coffee, dark and strong. Dorothy lowered herself into the chair opposite mine, pushing the folder with one fingertip as if it were something distasteful. "After Henry died," she began, "I signed the first paper they shoved under my nose. My brother-in-law called it a safeguard. Within a year, my account was empty. They kept saying it was for taxes, upkeep, debts. By the time I hired a lawyer, there was nothing left to protect." Her words sank into the room like a stone into deep water. I had heard whispers about Dorothy's struggles, but never in her own voice. The bitterness carried weight, not complaint. She sipped her coffee, then reached into her purse and slid a card across the table. "Michael Turner. He's young, but he doesn't flinch. He was the one who told me the truth, that I'd signed my dignity away with a flourish I thought was harmless." I picked up the card, tracing the embossed letters. "Michael Turner, attorney at law." The paper felt heavier than it should, as though responsibility had been pressed into its fibers. Dorothy leaned closer. "They'll try again, Eleanor. When charm doesn't work, they'll use urgency. When urgency fails, they'll use fear. Don't meet them alone." Her gaze softened, then the way women look at each other when they've survived storms too similar to ignore. "Rules protect love," she said quietly. "Papers protect dignity. Don't let anyone tell you silence is surrender. It can hold more power than shouting if you choose when to break it." I closed my hand around Thomas's brass key, warm from my pocket. Its grooves pressed into my palm like a promise. Dorothy saw the motion and gave a small nod as if she understood the language of tokens. The folder still lay between us, unsigned, untouched. The air smelled of peaches and coffee, sharp with truth. I gripped the key tighter, feeling its weight symbolic of the strength I had not yet revealed. A fortress doesn't need bricks, only ink and a seal. Michael Turner's office was tucked into a brick townhouse across from Charleston's courthouse. Its shutters were weathered, but inside the air was cool and exacting heavy with the scent of leather and old paper. Tall shelves framed the room law books, aligned like soldiers in formation. I felt for the first time since the wedding that I had stepped into territory where the rules bent toward me instead of away. I laid the folder on his desk. Michael adjusted his glasses and read without a word, his brows drawing tighter as each page turned. I studied his silence, the way lawyers measure every clause like carpenters checking beams. When he finally closed the folder, the look he gave me was unflinching. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, his voice clipped but steady. "Had you signed this, Brandon Hayes would now control every part of your life, your bank accounts, your villas, even your ability to challenge him. This isn't about convenience. This is the transfer of power." The certainty in his tone made the threat real in a way Brandon's charm never could. Thomas's warning stirred in my chest again. Never sign anything without reading every line. My refusal a week earlier had saved me, but instinct was not enough. "So what now?" I asked. "Now, Michael," said, pushing the folder aside, "we build walls higher than Brandon can climb." He reached for a yellow pad, his pen clicking like a trigger. "First, we freeze your credit. That prevents him from opening anything in your name. Second, we move the property deeds into a living trust with you as sole trustee. No one, not Brandon, not Caroline, can sell or mortgage them without your hand. And the accounts, we tighten them too. New passwords, alerts for every transaction. We remove vulnerabilities he might exploit. Think of it as reinforcing the doors and windows. His efficiency was both startling and comforting. He drafted papers quickly explaining as he went, never rushing my understanding. Each time I signed, I remembered the nights Thomas and I sat over blueprints, marking lines where walls should bear the weight. These signatures were blueprints too, only now the walls were legal, not stone. Finally, Michael pulled a fresh document toward him. "This is a power of attorney," he said, "but unlike Brandon's version, it names no one but you. It makes clear that only you hold authority." I took the pen. My hand trembled, not from doubt, but from the gravity of the moment. Ink slid onto the page, dark and final. Michael lifted his notary stamp, pressed it against the paper, and drove it down. The thud reverberated across the desk like a drumbeat, sharp and resonant. I felt it in my chest. That single strike carried the weight of defiance, as if the fortress had declared itself built. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Brandon had believed silence meant weakness. He thought orchids and papers could sideline me. But behind these walls, silence had teeth. Brandon thought I was weak. He didn't know the fortress had begun. Truth doesn't come from confessions. It leaks from words they never meant you to hear. The evening pressed down heavy, a humid August sky smearing the horizon with orange and violet. I had gone to the grocery store for bread and fruit, simple errands that tethered me to the ordinary. My cart rolled across the lot with a steady squeak, the asphalt radiating heat long after the sun dipped low. I was reaching for my keys when I saw him. Brandon stood by the row of carts, pacing like a caged animal. His shirt clung damp to his back, his phone pressed tight against his ear. His voice carried in sharp slices through the thick air. I eased my cart into the shadow of a pickup truck and stilled. "No, Gloria, listen." He snapped his tone, stripped of the silk he wore around Caroline. "The debt doesn't vanish just because the wedding's over. The banks are breathing down my neck. Without the villas, we're finished." He paused, dragging a hand through his hair. "She hasn't signed yet, but she will. She's old. She'll cave." My pulse hammered, but my hands were steady as I slipped my phone from my bag and tapped record. The small red circle glowed like a secret flame in the dark. Brandon's voice sharpened. "It's just a matter of time. We keep pushing. Caroline stays close. I play the dutiful son. You work the family angle, remind her of obligations. She won't hold out forever." The mention of Gloria Hayes set my teeth on edge. She was older, polished, the sort of woman who measured affection in assets. Now her voice muffled through the speaker spilled venom into Brandon's ear. I couldn't catch every word, but the intent was clear pressure, persistence, erosion, until the wall fell. I stayed crouched in the shadow, the heat from the asphalt rising around me. Thomas's words pulsed again. Never sign anything without reading every line. He had known how predators worked, patient, relentless. I tightened my grip on the phone. This time their own words would betray them. Brandon laughed, then low and cruel. "Once she signs, the villas are gone. We flip them, clear the debt, and the rest is ours. Papers are just paper. She's too tired to fight." Each word was another stone in the foundation of my resolve. He thought age meant surrender. He thought silence meant absence. But silence listens. Silence remembers. And silence records. A car door slammed somewhere across the lot, jolting him into glancing around. I ducked, lower heart hammering, until his gaze moved past. He turned back to the call, muttering curses, and strode toward his car. His taillights bled red across the pavement as he pulled away. I straightened, slowly, slipping the phone back into my bag. The recording was safe, sealed, like an arrow in its quiver. For the first time since Thomas's death, I felt the weight shift, not enough to win the war, but enough to know I was not defenseless. In that moment, I knew silence had given me my first weapon proof. When my daughter cried, my heart trembled, but my hands stayed on the teacup, not on the papers. A pale September afternoon dimmed the room, the kind of gray that swallowed color. I poured tea into 2 cups, setting one before Caroline. She sat rigid, twisting her wedding band, her eyes red from more than the weather. "Mom," she began, voice frayed, "if you'd just sign, everything would get easier. Brandon can handle the bills, the villas, the calls. You shouldn't be carrying all this. It would help the family. Help the family." At the wedding, those words had sounded like toast. Now they clanged like chains. Steam curled from the cup, a fragile veil between us. "He's not trying to take from you," she pressed on quickly. "He's trying to protect you. You're alone in this." "I am not alone," I said quietly. "And complicated isn't a reason to surrender." Her eyes flashed. "You say surrender. I say trust. Isn't that what families do?" I lifted my cup and held it steady. The papers she meant weren't in the room, yet they crowded us all the same. "At your wedding, I sat behind orchids," I said. "That night taught me something. Visibility is not a courtesy. It's a choice." Her shoulders stiffened. "So this is revenge for that?" "Because of a seating chart, no. This is a boundary." My voice was steady, the word as firm as oak. A line that says, love doesn't have to sign itself away to prove it's real. Caroline's tears welled, rolling fast down her cheeks. "I'm trying to help. You won't even meet me halfway." "I am meeting you," I answered, "but at the only place that keeps us safe on my side of the line." She rose, pacing the carpet. "The banks are pressing. Brandon says one signature settles it. You'd still own everything. He'd only manage." Thomas taught me what words like only and manage mean, I said. They open doors you don't notice until it's too late. She turned sharply. "Dad would want you taken care of. He did take care of me. He built walls on paper and left me the instructions. Never sign anything without reading every line. I've read Brandon's. They aren't care. They're control." Her tears fell harder. "You've always trusted me." "Why not now? I do trust you," I said. "I trust that you're scared, that you want relief. But I won't hand you a weight you can't see. I won't sign so you can breathe for a week and drown for a year. So you'd rather watch us fall apart. I'd rather keep you from falling with me. Some lifelines are leashes." Silence stretched. The tea cooled, untouched. She looked at me as though I'd chosen money over her. "I'm choosing guardianship over guilt," I said. "I'm choosing to remain your mother instead of your mark." The words broke her. She sobbed openly and my chest ached with every sound, but my hands remained on the cup. "Please," she whispered, "if you love me." I set the cup down, porcelain clicking like punctuation. Boundaries don't kill love. They keep it alive. The clock ticked its agreement. Caroline's face hardened through her tears. She grabbed her bag, wiping her cheeks with sharp, impatient hands. "You've turned into someone I don't recognize," she said at the door. "I'm becoming who your father trained me to be," I replied softly. "Someone who keeps the house standing when storms demand the deed." She lingered only a second, then yanked the handle. Caroline storms out, slamming the door. That night, I wrote to my husband a letter he'd never read, but one I needed to see myself. The house was quiet, except for the ticking of the old mantel clock and the faint patter of September rain. A single lamp cast a circle of gold on my desk, leaving the corners of the study in shadow. I smoothed a sheet of stationery, uncapped my pen, and felt the weight of words press against my chest before they ever touched paper. Thomas. I began letting his name steady me. Today, our daughter came with tears. She begged me to sign away the very thing you built to keep us standing. She said it would help the family. I sat across from her with tea cooling in our cups, and I told her no. My hands trembled, but they stayed still. I did not sign. The brass key lay beside me, grooves worn from your touch. I tapped it lightly, remembering the sound of your boots on half-finished floors, the murmur of your voice as you measured beams. You built the villas to outlast storms, to hold laughter and grief alike. They are more than assets, they are legacy. Tonight, I promised you again, I will not betray that. I wrote of Brandon pacing in a parking lot, with his phone pressed tight, sneering that I would cave because I am old. I wrote of orchids at Caroline's wedding, arranged to hide me from view. Shame is cunning. It knows where to place the flowers. You once told me one day you'll know why. Tonight, as I put ink to paper, I feel I finally do. The why is defense. I filled the letter with the small truths of ordinary life, the kettle's sigh in the morning, the creak of the porch after rain, the faint cedar scent that lingers in your closet. These details are where you still live. Writing them kept you near. Then I let in the doubts. I admitted I am weary of being steel. Caroline's words. You're someone I don't recognize, echo still. Silence protects me, but it presses down like armor worn too long. I miss the luxury of leaning on you, the relief of letting someone else say no. But the choice is mine now. I told you about Dorothy's courage, how she handed me a lawyer's name like a compass. Rules protect love. Papers protect dignity, she said. And Michael's office orderly lined with books where his notary stamp sounded like a drumbeat, like your heart returning through paper. Piece by piece, I am building the fortress you left me instructions for. The rain grew heavier. My hand cramped, but I forced one last line. If silence is armor, why does it weigh so much? I folded the page, pressing each crease firm. The drawer slid open with its familiar wooden sigh, revealing the stack of letters I've written since you left. Confessions, doubts, promises. I placed tonight's words on top, aligned the corners, and shut it gently. At church, I found a classroom I didn't expect, not for children, but for widows like me. The October air was sharp, but the basement hummed with old radiators and the sweet smell of percolating coffee. Folding tables formed a ring of chairs, each filled by women whose postures carried both weariness and resilience. A plate of cookies sat untouched in the middle, as if grief had dulled appetite, but not courtesy. Dorothy waved me forward, her expression both gentle and firm, the way someone looks at you when they know exactly why you've come. Eleanor. She said, these are my sisters. We've all been where you are. The introductions were soft, but the stories cut deep. Ruth Parker, her frame slight. Her eyes, still keen, spoke first. I signed too soon. My son called it a formality, a way to ease my burden. Within a year, the farm was gone. Don't let them use your sorrow as a crowbar. Bernice Lee leaned forward, her height commanding the space. She tapped her notebook, its pages crowded with dates and names. I write everything down, every call, every word. Memory forgives too easily. Paper does not. A log is armor. Alma Rodriguez clasped her hands, her accent heavy with both warmth and sorrow. My brother-in-law said he would hold the company shares until I was ready. They were sold before the month was out. When people see a widow, they see an unlocked door. Each account rang with recognition. Their voices formed a kind of chorus, not rehearsed, but harmonized by pain. I felt the weight in my chest shift, not lighter, but distributed, as if silence shared became bearable. Dorothy's hand closed over mine, steady. Listen, Eleanor. Record everything. Keep copies. Never meet them alone. And remember, this saying, no, isn't against your child. It's how you stay their mother. The words struck harder than any sermon. For months I had wrestled with the fear that resistance meant rejection, that my silence was a wedge in my daughter's heart. Now, I saw it differently. Boundaries could be an act of love, a way to preserve motherhood instead of forfeiting it. The door creaked and the air shifted. Harold Whitfield entered Thomas's brother, his jawline familiar, but his smile practiced thin. His gaze swept the circle before settling on me. "Eleanor," he said smoothly, "you know the villas were never meant to sit idle. They're Whitfield property, held in trust by you, nothing more. The next generation deserves its due. You can't keep them locked away forever." The room stiffened. Ruth folded her arms. Bernice clicked her pen like a warning, and Alma's eyes narrowed. I felt their presence like a shield at my back. "I'm holding them, as Thomas intended," I answered evenly, though my pulse drummed against my throat. Harold chuckled as if humoring a stubborn child. "We'll talk again soon," he said, before turning and climbing the stairs. His footsteps echoed long after he had gone. Silence lingered until Dorothy broke it, her voice low but unwavering. "Pressure doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're standing in a place they can't reach. Hold your ground." I carried their strength home with me. In the hallway, I took a marker and wrote in bold letters on a sheet of paper. No documents signed without Michael Turner present. I taped it firmly to my front door, ink stark against white. If you think Eleanor's silence is her weakness, hit subscribe and follow her next move. You won't believe how the next chapter turns the tables. When he pounded the door, I knew silence was no longer just a choice. It was my final line. Dusk lowered itself over Charleston in shades of violet and rust, the air damp with the salt of the harbor. My porch light flickered on, humming against the wood frame, as if it sensed what was coming. The bold note I had taped to the door stared out in thick black ink. No documents signed without Michael Turner present. I had written it with a steady hand that morning, but now it felt like a shield I could almost hide behind. Brandon's first blow shook the chain and rattled the glass panes. "Open the door, Eleanor." His voice cracked through the evening like a whip. This has gone on long enough. I pressed my palm against the wood, felt its warmth from the pounding, and answered evenly. "All documents go through Michael Turner." "That's not what this is," he shot back, breath fast and uneven. "I came as family. Caroline is worried sick. We just need you to sign, make life easier." "Then talk from there," I said, refusing to lift the chain. The pause told me he had not expected defiance. He tried to smooth his tone, slipping into persuasion. "You're cornering yourself. The banks don't wait. Taxes are coming. Don't let pride drag you down. We're offering help. All documents go through Michael Turner." I leaned on the words the way Thomas once leaned on a beam before nailing it firm. He laughed sharp without joy. "You think your little lawyer will save you. I'm the one protecting you from drowning. Don't you understand?" The handle jiggled furiously, the chain clattered. Inside, I brushed Thomas's old brass key in my pocket, the one that had opened every villa door. His voice seemed to murmur with it. Never sign anything you don't understand. You've ignored my calls? Ignored Caroline's Brandon raged. She cries because of you. You think this stubborn act makes you noble? It makes you cruel. I won't discuss this at the door, I said, calm as tea cooling on the table. If you have business, you know where to send it. His restraint cracked. It's one signature. That's all. You're too old to manage this. Everyone knows you don't even understand what you own. He struck the door again. The teacups in my cabinet rattled porcelain bells, ringing against one another. Leave Brandon. You are not welcome inside. For a moment the world went still. Then the silence split with his fury. You're just an old woman alone. Your walls won't save you. The words tried to burrow deep, but other voices rose louder. Dorothy's firm counsel, Ruth's laughter through her grief, the notary's thud like a battle drum. Behind my ribs, strength gathered like tide returning. Thomas had built me walls, but I had chosen to live strong within them. You're wasting your time, I told him. My voice held, and I heard in it the cadence of every widow who had warned me never to yield. He cursed, muttered something bitter. Then the slam of his car door broke across the block like thunder. The engine roared, gravel spat. And then he was gone. Only cicadas and the steady hum of the porch light remained. I waited, counting slowly, letting the stillness seep in. My hand rested on the door, no longer trembling, but firm. The locks had held the chain had held, and so had I. In the quiet, his insult hovered like smoke. I let it brush by me, then set it outside where it belonged. Eleanor grips Thomas's key in her pocket. No, I am the fortress. I didn't need to tear my daughter's marriage apart. The cracks began to show on their own. November rain needled the windows. In Caroline's dining room, a brass chandelier shed bright fatigue on a table no one touched. The roast cooled, beans dulled, condensation trailed the glasses. Brandon carved with jerky strokes that scraped porcelain. Caroline's fork hovered undecided. She had been quiet since the day she left my house in tears. That silence sat with them now. She searched his face as if the man she married might reassemble out of habit. Brandon, she said at last, another letter came today. You told me the line of credit was handled. His knife paused, then moved. It is. Timing. Accounts shuffle in Q4. Your mother is the choke point. Once she signs the headaches, stop. This isn't about my mother. She set the fork down very carefully. It's about surprises I didn't consent to. He smiled without warmth. I'm protecting us. Do you want to watch lenders circle? You want the house to turn into a lesson Eleanor is hoarding what should move. She's stubborn, you know that. She's cautious, Carolyn said. That isn't cruel. He laughed a hard syllable. Cruel is letting your husband fight fires dry while your mother sits on water. Stop talking about her like that. She answered softer but firmer. This is our table, our bills. What do we owe? He aligned his napkin with manic care. Debts aren't the point. Momentum is. I have deals about to close. If you'd stop letting Eleanor poison you, you'd see it. Poison me. Color left her face, then returned. You brought a lawyer to her kitchen and pushed a power of attorney across her table. You called it a courtesy. It was protection, he snapped, from her confusion. She doesn't even understand what she owns. Or she understands exactly, Caroline said, and that's why she said no. Rain deepened. The HVAC breathed. A dog barked and stopped. Brandon's jaw worked. "You're young," he said, clipped. "You didn't grow up watching banks repossess futures." "I did. So I move fast." "Show me the numbers. You wouldn't understand the structure. Then explain it." He reached for the bottle. The neck clicked the rim. Red sloshed. "Why are we doing this? Your mother made you afraid. You think saying no is virtue. It's inertia, dressed up." A tremor crossed her, then steadied. "You blame her for everything. Why?" "Because she's the problem. Because she refuses a simple signature that would fix this." "Fix what exactly?" He stared past her. Accounts, vendors, a short-term refinance. Nothing dramatic unless she keeps playing gatekeeper. She looked at the tablecloth where the juices had bled into the weave, then up. The question was already formed. "Did you marry me? Or my mother's inheritance?" It dropped between them like a plate. He blinked as if light had changed. His mouth thinned. Heat rose through him with nowhere to go. "Don't be ridiculous," he said. But the color in his face contradicted the words. "Answer me," she whispered. He lifted his glass. His hand shook, not with fear, with rage at being cornered. He slammed the base onto the table. Crystal burst into bright shrapnel. Wine ran in quick arterial lines across the linen, a map of damage spreading from the center. Caroline recoiled, chair-scraping. He stared at the mess he'd made, chest-heaving, and would not meet her eyes. Silence followed. Ringing. The rain sounded like 1,000 small verdicts. Somewhere inside it, a future turned on its hinge. She had seen something she could not unsee. He had shown something he could no longer hide. Brandon slams his glass shards flying, refusing to answer. Sometimes justice doesn't bang a gavel. It speaks through a banker's quiet refusal. "I wasn't at the branch. I was home with a screwdriver and a squeaky hinge when Michael later told me what he saw, and I could picture it as if I'd stood on those polished tiles myself." November light slid across marble counters. Pens were chained to stands. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and hot printers. Brandon came in briskly, tie-cinched too tight, smile stretched thin, a folder clamped under his arm like a badge. He asked to streamline a few details on the Whitfield accounts, mailing addresses, authorized signers, routine maintenance. He said he had authority. The banker behind the counter was young and steady, the kind whose nameplate flashes when she turns. She asked for ID. He produced his license and a broad power of attorney, placing the POA on the counter with a soft, confident thud, as if that single page could pry open any lock. She read without changing expression. Phones murmured. A printer chattered. Somewhere, a child in a stroller squeaked. When she set the document down, her voice was neutral. "These are trust accounts. Changes require the trustee in person with verified identification." Also, she glanced at her screen. "There's a legal hold and an attorney of record notice from Michael Turner. No updates permitted without him." Brandon tapped the POA with an impatient finger. "This covers it. For operating accounts, sometimes," she said. "Not trust instruments, and not with this flag. I'll need to escalate to compliance." While she dialed, Brandon arranged his folder and practiced patience. He didn't see Harold at first, Thomas's brother loitering by the brochures, pretending to study mortgage rates while listening to every breath. Harold has always collected weather. He doesn't make storms, but he loves to forecast them. The banker listened, then nodded to whatever compliance told her. She offered Brandon a small, professional smile that meant, "No. We'll have to contact Mr. Turner directly." "What for?" "We're wasting time," he said, volume edging up. "Because there's a voice password on file," she answered, "and a note, no changes. Absent the trustee and counsel in person. It's very specific." Heads tilted. Attention leaned in without moving. Harold shifted closer. a shadow playing friend. She put the call on speaker. Michael's voice, calm and clipped, filled the lobby. Counsel for Ms. Whitfield speaking. The trust prohibits delegation of authority. Deeds have been re-recorded. Credit is frozen. Beneficiary and address changes are blocked. Please document this attempt and decline. Brandon tried to cut in. This is family business. Then keep it within the family, Michael replied, still courteous. The bank will not facilitate. Decline. The softest word can sting the most. The banker ended the call and folded her hands, neat as a seal. I'm unable to process your request. Sound in a room changes when pride takes a hit. It goes heavy and careful. Color climbed Brandon's neck. He grabbed his papers too quickly, a sheet skittering to the floor. Harold didn't stoop to help. He watched, storing details like coins he'd spend later at a coffee shop. You'll hear from us, Brandon said, but it lacked heat. He tugged at his tie, failed to tame it, and strode for the door with the wrong kind of speed. People found their shoes very interesting. A mother eased a stroller aside. The glass swung on his exit and thumped shut behind him. Tie askew, face thunder red, rage looking for somewhere to live. The fortress we built with Michael in July, deeds re-recorded credit. Freeze's attorney of record, the voice password Dorothy insisted I set, had held the line exactly the way a seawall should hold when the first hard wave strikes. Procedure, not drama. Paper, not shouting. But it was public, and that mattered too. Harold had seen him fail. By afternoon, he was 2 doors down at the cafe, telling a careful story about a misunderstanding with paperwork and a bank being difficult, never quite untrue, never quite clean. Rumor makes noise. It does not move a ledger. My phone rang while I still had oil on my hands. I put the screwdriver down and answered. Michael's voice carried the crisp satisfaction of a bolt sliding home. He tried to change addresses and signers, he said. Compliance flagged it. The branch declined. They documented the incident and added instructions to route any future contact straight to legal. Harold was there, hovering. Of course he was, I said, touching the brass key in my pocket. The house felt taller by an inch. Michael paused, as if offering me the last word. There wasn't much to add. Some victories arrive as the absence of disaster, as a door that does not open when pushed. All the quiet work from Chapter 4's legal fortress had done exactly what it was built to do. The fortress held. When Carolyn stepped onto my porch, I saw not only tears in her eyes, but a choice forming in her heart. It was December 2023, the cold sharp enough to creep through wood and cloth. The porch light glowed soft gold against the frost. At the gate, Caroline stood with a small suitcase, shoulders hunched inside a coat. I remembered buying her years ago. She looked younger and older, at once stripped of certainty. Mom. Her voice barely carried. Do you have a minute? I rested one hand on the doorframe, the other around Thomas's brass key. The note still clung to the wood. No documents signed without Michael Turner present. It wasn't written for her, but its black letters steadied me. She pulled the suitcase onto the porch, the zipper jingling once. I didn't know where else to go. Here is fine, I said. Here is home. Her breath shuddered. We stood in silence, the porch, a waiting room between storms. She rubbed her hands, then spoke quickly, afraid she'd lose the courage. He threw a glass, she said. But worse than the glass is his voice when he's cornered. He lied, Mom. Not shading numbers, lying. I saw an email begging his mother for another loan against money that doesn't exist. When I confronted him, he called me hysterical, said you'd poisoned me. Then he grabbed my wrist, not enough to bruise, but enough to show me what he keeps hidden. She drew herself taller. I packed after he left. No note. I let the quiet breathe. The old me would have filled it with advice. The woman I'd become held space. Tea, I asked softly. She nodded, but added, out here first. I brought 2 cups. We sipped steam curling in the golden light. Tears slipped, but she didn't collapse. The porch held them. Everyone warned me about mothers-in-law, she said. No one warned me about husbands who make charm into currency. Her eyes lifted to the note on the door. You didn't move it for me. It wasn't for you, I said. But I can take it down. She touched the corner and shook her head. Leave it. It tells the truth. The hall clock chimed inside. Caroline's grip tightened on her cup. He's not who I thought. Or maybe I finally see him. The bank something happened, didn't it? He raged about a clerk and a lawyer who thinks he's God. Michael set boundaries, I said simply. They held. She exhaled, not relief, but recognition. That's why I came. Not to confess to borrow the shape of your boundary until I can grow mine. You don't need permission to protect yourself, I said. But I'll stand beside you. Her eyes filled again, but steady. She leaned close enough that I caught the scent of cold on her coat. Her words came quiet, but final. He never wanted me. He wanted you, your fortune. Truth rearranged the night. The porch seemed to settle. The key in my pocket warmed. I thought of Thomas, the widows, the notary's thud, the bank's refusal, all bricks leading to this moment. Not a courtroom, but a daughter claiming light. I touched my forehead to hers. You are wanted here, I whispered. For yourself. She nodded. The suitcase handle clicked. The cups cooled. I turned the knob, slid the chain free, brass, singing like a promise. I unlocked the door, both step inside together. He thought I'd sit in silence like at table 16, but this time, I sat at the head of the table beside my lawyer. The oak table stretched between us like a battlefield. At one end, Brandon leaned forward, jaw tight, Gloria Hayes at his side, with a notary whose pen hovered ready. Harold Whitfield sat in the corner, arms folded, the family observer, who had always treated me like a placeholder rather than a partner in Thomas's legacy. Michael Turner shuffled a thick folder of filings. Beside him, I straightened my shoulders. This was not a ballroom table tucked behind orchids. This was mine. Brandon's smile was more sneer than charm. We're here to settle things the easy way. Just sign the transfer, Eleanor. Everyone's waiting. I rested my hands on the polished surface, letting silence carry weight. It was Caroline's presence, quiet tense at the far side, that filled the room with its own charge. She said nothing, but her eyes refused to look at him. She was listening, truly listening, for the first time. Michael's voice cut the air with calm authority. Before anything is discussed, let the record show that all of Eleanor Whitfield's properties have been secured under a living trust. Every deed, every clause has been locked against unauthorized transfer. The notary shifted uneasily. Gloria's hand twitched, her polished nails rapping against the table. This isn't necessary, she said. We all know the villas were meant for the family. Eleanor is simply a custodian. I met her gaze unflinching. Thomas built them for dignity, not for vultures. Brandon slapped his palm against the table, rattling glasses of water. You're clinging to things you can't even manage. Do you think walls of paper will protect you? Michael didn't flinch. He slid forward another document, the sound of the folder's edge sharp in the quiet. Legally, yes. No transfer, no lien, no debt restructuring can occur without Eleanor's explicit signature, and given her position, that signature will never come. It was more than law, It was finality. The fortress we had built from paper and ink now stood between me and their hunger. Caroline's eyes flicked toward me. For a fleeting second, I saw her recognize what strength looked like, not in Brandon's thunder, but in steady refusal. She pressed her lips together, and for once she didn't defend him. Gloria tried one last maneuver, leaning forward, voice syrupy. "Eleanor, think of Caroline's future. Don't you want peace in your family?" I reached for the glass of water in front of me, my hand steady. Peace doesn't come from surrender. It comes from truth. The silence stretched long enough for Harold to cough into his fist, the sound oddly like a gavel striking. Brandon seized the pen the notary had laid out, gripping it, as though sheer force could carve obedience. He shoved the papers toward me, ink poised. "Sign it, or you'll regret it." Michael's hand covered the folder, firm. "Threats won't undo the filings. You've lost this round." Brandon's face mottled red, his tie hanging loose as he realized the futility of the gesture. Rage burned hotter for being powerless. Across the table, Caroline whispered not to him, but to herself. Words only I caught. "So this is who he is." It was the sound of a scale tipping. Brandon slammed the pen down so hard, it cracked against the wood, rolling to the floor with a metallic clink. He stood, pushing his chair back violently, the oak groaning under the strain. "This isn't over," he shouted, his voice echoing through the hallways of the law office, leaving behind the sour stench of his fury. Sometimes the defeated don't retreat. They shatter everything around them. The remnants of a hastily abandoned dinner lay across the table, plates, askew, wine spilled in dark puddles. Brandon paced like a caged animal, hands trembling, eyes darting, his rage barely contained. Caroline stood near the door, suitcase at her feet, heart pounding but mind clear. The tension between them stretched taut, ready to snap. "You think you can betray me?" Brandon shouted, pointing an accusatory finger. "After everything, after I built this life with you." His voice cracked a mix of fury and panic, the carefully constructed mask of control fracturing. Caroline's eyes filled with both fear and resolve. "I'm not betraying you," she said evenly, her voice calm despite the adrenaline. "I'm asking the truth. About the debts, the schemes, what you've hidden from me and from everyone." Her words cut sharper than any blade. For once she was no longer the passive witness in his theater of lies. Brandon slammed a fist against the oak table, rattling the silverware. "How dare you question me?" He grabbed a wine bottle, tossing it carelessly. It shattered against the wall, crimson liquid dripping like a wound across the baseboard. He flung chairs aside as if they could absorb his humiliation. The room became a storm of anger and chaos, shards of glass and broken plates marking his desperation. Caroline took a step forward, unwavering. "Stop hiding behind destruction, Brandon. You didn't marry me. You married my mother's vault." Her words hung in the air, resonating with undeniable truth. The accusation echoed not as insult, but as revelation. Brandon's motives, transparent and greedy, laid bare. He froze for a moment, breathing heavily, the reality of her insight hitting him harder than any of his own tantrums. The energy shifted. The room, once charged with his fury, now vibrated with the quiet authority of truth. Caroline gripped her suitcase handle, her decision final. She would no longer be part of his illusions, nor a pawn in his relentless pursuit of wealth. With one last controlled exhale, she turned. The click of the suitcase wheels against the hardwood was like a drumbeat of liberation. She opened the door and left, letting it slam behind her. The sound resonated in the empty space like the closing of a chapter, the echo of a choice fully embraced. Brandon sank into a chair, face buried in his hands. His isolation was complete. No allies, no compliance, no obedience remained. The walls of his constructed empire felt hollow, the authority he wielded now meaningless. Caroline's departure marked the turning point, the unraveling he could neither prevent nor repair. In her absence, Eleanor's influence loomed larger unseen, but inevitable, a silent reminder that greed cannot overshadow dignity indefinitely. For the first time, every eye was on me, not as a shadow, but as the woman at the center. The Charleston clerk's office courtroom, usually a place of hushed monotony, hummed with a quiet anticipation that seemed to settle in my chest like a slow, steady drumbeat. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, painting the polished wood with pale gold, illuminating the faces of those who had once doubted me, dismissed me, or tried to manipulate me. Brandon sat across from me, his tie crooked, a faint sheen of perspiration on his forehead, while Harold Whitfield lingered silently at the back, his expression inscrutable. Around me were the allies who had stood in shadows alongside me: Dorothy Ruth Bernice Alma, and most importantly, my daughter Caroline, whose hand rested lightly on my arm, a gesture of solidarity that had seemed impossible months ago. The clerk, a poised woman in her 50s, adjusted her glasses and began the proceedings. We are here to confirm the ownership and transfer of property assets belonging to the late Thomas Whitfield. According to the filings and legal protections in place, Eleanor Whitfield retains sole ownership of the 8 villas along the Charleston shoreline. Her voice was firm, impartial, yet somehow satisfying in its finality. A hush fell over the room, as if the walls themselves exhaled relief. Brandon opened his mouth, perhaps to argue, to contest, to demand, but the clerk's eyes flicked toward him, and in that instant, his protest evaporated into futility. Objection overruled, she stated her tone, leaving no room for debate. Legally and socially, he was finished. Caroline squeezed my arm, her eyes glistening with tears she had restrained too long. "Mom," she whispered, "they can't touch you now." Her voice was both affirmation and apology, a reconciliation of past misjudgments, and a declaration that she was finally on my side. The courtroom seemed to shift, the energy realigning to acknowledge what had always been true. I had never been powerless, only underestimated. Michael Ever, the steady presence, gave a subtle nod, his confidence in the fortress we had built tangible, even in the silence between words. Dorothy and the widows exchanged quiet, knowing glances, their shared experiences converging in this singular victory. Each had fought their own battles, and this moment, in some small way, honored them as well. Brandon's shoulders slumped, the fire in his eyes dimming as the reality of defeat settled over him like a damp cloak. His schemes, his bluster, his attempts to manipulate both daughter and mother, all of it lay exposed and impotent. Harold said nothing, a silent witness to the collapse of pride and arrogance, while the courthouse murmurs quietly acknowledged that justice, though delayed, had arrived in full measure. Outside, the winter air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of salt from the nearby harbor. Caroline and I stepped onto the porch, leaving the courthouse behind, but carrying the triumph within us. I lit the porch lamp, the golden glow spilling across the steps and doorframe. The light flickered gently in the evening chill, symbolic of love, preserved yet protected, of boundaries respected and dignity maintained. Caroline leaned against me, her head resting lightly on my shoulder, a silent promise that we would face the future together, unafraid. I exhaled, feeling the weight of months lift the burden of silence now transformed into empowerment. Boundaries don't kill love. I murmured, my voice steady in the quiet. They keep it alive. The porch light continued to glow, a beacon of justice, of family, and of lessons hard-earned, but now secured in both heart and deed. I know what it feels like to be underestimated, to have your efforts dismissed and your voice silenced. For years I stayed in the shadows, watching those I trusted twist their intentions for greed. But silence became my armor, and patience my weapon. I invite you, my readers, to witness this journey, not just as spectators, but as allies. Share your encouragement, leave a comment, and remind me that courage matters. In life, standing firm in your principles may feel lonely, but integrity, persistence, and the quiet gathering of strength can turn even the deepest betrayal into triumph.